and recording again. So let's talk about some dragons.
Yes.
Yep. So I made that video. I won't even lie to you. Like, that was so fun to make. I had so much more fun making that than I had like making any of the other videos. The other videos kind of felt like work because they kind of were. I had to do like some research and edit them together. There was a script. So I'm not gonna lie, I don't like doing those. I did those sort of out of necessity because I feel like I had to. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I feel like I had to. So I don't want to do those regularly, but I really do like making more artistic videos that are, somewhat vague and have some interesting,
Yes.
dynamic to them. And so I as you know, did I ever? I showed you. I know you've seen the Peterson video, but did I show you that I have that children's book that I bought it for Felix?
No, I did not know that.
Nice. So I have that. As soon as Felix was born, or right around then, I was like, I'm buying this book if I can get my hands on it, because it's basically been my favorite, like maybe my favorite Peterson thing, maybe besides Clean Your Room, which is somewhat related.
Yes.
But it's been like my favorite thing. When I heard it, I was like, I literally see the world as dragons now. And so I was like, I have to get Felix that book. As soon as he's old enough, I'm going to read it to him all the time because it is so good. I mean, it is so good. So I knew I wanted to make that video just because I feel like I thought coronavirus was a dragon, like a huge dragon. And that's kind of like when I was making it, I was like, I've got to fit coronavirus in somehow. But I may have been too vague with it because I kind of just included it at the end, but the reason I included it to give some, someone was asking me to in this podcast to be more to give some insight into it, so I'm doing that right now, basically. So the coronavirus thing I wanted to add because the movie Contagion, when that came out, it was made the way it was made because, from what I understand, it was made as almost like a warning. And Bill Gates, I don't know if you ever saw Bill Gates' TED Talk in 2015, but he did a TED Talk where he said the next biggest disaster will not look like nuclear warfare. It'll be much smaller, and it'll look like this. And he puts a picture of a virus on the screen. And he
So you're saying it was Bill Gates' fault?
Pretty much. He talks about the movie Contagion. And he says, like, he basically just says, like, we're not prepared for what's to come, and it's almost certainly to come. And so when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, this is so true. And we've had little glimpses of it with like swine flu, with Ebola, and we just have never put anything in place for something like this. And now we're just scrambling, and even though it seems bad, I think we're insanely lucky with how mild it is. It's not 20% like in Contagion. So when I saw that, I was like, this is like the perfect example of an amazing dragon because it's tiny and you don't see it. So you're like, okay, it doesn't exist. If it's not there, it doesn't exist, and I can just ignore it. Even though deep in your consciousness, you're like, someone out there in the government, whether it's the CDC or past presidents who should have dealt with this, they know that this was an issue, and they just chose to ignore it. And what's amazing is you can't see it, and then all of a sudden it's everywhere, and it's just this massive dragon, and it is just chaos everywhere. I was like, man, coronavirus is like the definition of a dragon.
Yes.
So yeah, that was why I had to include it in the end, and I hope that comes across without me spelling it out, even though I'm doing that right now, because to me it was just like the perfect largest example. Yeah. Sorry, so that's all.
Yeah. I was gonna say that the timing of it was good. To me, the point of the coronavirus came across loud and clear. I was curious, what type of reception have you gotten on the video?
Not a lot. I don't even know. Other than the people I specifically sent it to, I'm not sure who's seen it and who hasn't. Some people have said like, "Wow, that's cool" or whatever, but I don't know anything specific other than Amy. Which thank you, Amy, for the kind words. She messaged me on Instagram and had some nice things to say and encouraged me, which was, nice. So
great.
Thanks, Amy.
Amy is my wife.
Yes,
those who don't know.
She can't hear me, I assume, but. So really not a lot. I sent it to my dad, and he said that it was nice, which was interesting because I was curious what he would think because I don't think he's the type to particularly. I sent it to my parents. My mom didn't respond, probably because she thinks dragons are demonic or something. I don't know. Shout out to mom. But my dad seemed to like it. He said it was neat. I don't remember. I've sent it to a few people. Chris Jackson said he liked it. I think Chris was the one who asked me to sort of elaborate more on it. Because I was asking people if they thought it was too vague. I asked you that.
Yeah.
And Chris was like, no, I didn't think so. But I think it was Chris. And he said, if you have a podcast with Ben or whatever, go into it a little bit more and just for your own sake or for other people who might think it's too vague.
Yeah.
Not a ton of reception, and not really. I mean, I don't know what a ton of views would be. It has like 250 views in a couple of days, so I don't know if that's kind of on par with most of my other videos. So, I don't know. Like, it's hard. It's really hard to share stuff now. So I'm only on Instagram and Twitter. I have like no Twitter followers.
Right.
And then Instagram is like really difficult. You're asking a lot of people on Instagram to go watch the video because you basically post like a snippet of it and say like, go to my bio, click on it. And then, if you do that, you can't like it or comment on it because it pulls it up without signing you in from the Instagram app. So if people had thoughts on it, they're not going to be motivated enough to go to YouTube, find it, rewatch it, comment on it. So it's kind of weird. It's really hard to figure out. I personally love it. And it's like one of the things I'm most proud of that I've ever made on YouTube, honestly, even though it's like not that crazy. I just I really, really enjoyed making it. So whether or not it's well received, I'm probably going to keep doing it because I really like doing it. And I really didn't love doing any of the other stuff.
Yeah. And I think the artistic nature of the production, in my mind, makes it more consumable by people. It's short. It's got nice music. It's kind of has this aura about it that makes you want to keep watching it. And I think that's
it
as far
had
as getting people to.
So I looked at the analytics of it, and it doesn't have any dislikes, so I guess that's a good thing. But really, not a lot of my videos do. I think it's mostly because people I know watch them, and very few people that I don't know watch them. That might not be true actually, but regardless, I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh, I looked.
So I did.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I did think of another great example of a large scale dragon. And so I've been doing a fair amount of reading and listening to early American history. It's just been kind of a fascination of mine. So one huge dragon for our country was slavery.
Yep.
So essentially, I'm not going to reiterate the entire history of the United States, but basically, when they signed the Declaration of Independence, that was, the kind of the instantiation of the Enlightenment principles that all men are created equal and are endowed with these unalienable rights.
The thing. Sorry, I don't know if you saw that.
I did see that. Oh my goodness.
So the thing. All right, sorry.
Yeah, and so there was a general sense among most of the country that was true, and that also applied to slavery. And when it came to the time of the mid 1780s, when they started realizing that the Articles of Confederation were faulty and that were not sustainable, and they started rallying the troops to for the Constitution. They basically made a decision that was a calculated decision in order to preserve the country. They decided that they were not going to deal with the problem of slavery because they knew that if it came up at the convention and it was talked about, a plan for getting rid of it, that they were going to lose North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and possibly Virginia. So really, everyone north of the Potomac most of those states were in agreement that slavery was a repudiation of the independence principles. And Virginia was kind of on the fence, where like a lot of the Old Dominion, so George Washington and James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, they all in their letters and stuff denounced slavery, but they were realizing that if they wanted to have a unified country, that they basically couldn't deal with this problem now because they would have lost. So it was weird because at the convention, which was going on all summer, it would have been one of the top 3 things that was affecting the country, and they basically didn't talk about it at all. and that reflects itself in the actual Constitution.
Oop, I lost you for a second. Uh-oh. I think we lost Ben. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, I lost you, but sorry. Reflected in the Constitution.
Yeah, it was reflected in the Constitution that it was basically not talked about. So it was the perfect elephant in the room where they more or less didn't acknowledge it because they didn't want to scare the southern states away. And so what they kind of settled on was a plan to address it in 20 years. So it was basically 1807, I believe, is when they were going to look at the issue again and then see if they could eliminate it, because the majority of the states did want slavery eliminated from existence for the country. And so more or less they were like, okay, we can't deal with it because we don't think we're going to have a unified country. And so we'll just punt 20 years down the road and figure it out. Well, that was the worst idea that they could have executed, because the problem only grew. The dragon only grew in size, and the southern states' dependence on slavery just grew and grew and grew, and eventually it took off with not the House, but it took off with the whole southern states.
Yep.
And then led to the bloodiest war in American history. And honestly, we're still dealing with the after effect of it because of kind of the over racialized world that is really kind of unique to the United States. And so when I realized that, I was like, that was a dragon that they should have figured out how to deal with. They should have figured out how to confront it, and instead they let it grow.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's amazing when you start looking at stuff like that. Like, you think, like, it's hard for me not to look at things and think, okay, if I let that go, it'll be the same. It'll be the same in the future as it is now. Like, it's not the case. So like, if you don't really conceptualize it that way, you might think like, oh, and this is not true, but you might think, if I just let it go, I'll get to it at some point. And like, one of the best examples is like a noise in your car. So like, most people have a noise in their car. Their car's making a weird noise. They just do not get right on it because it's like, maybe it'll fix itself, which of course it won't. Or when it gets worse, then I'll fix it. But the damage might be far worse later on. And like, everybody knows this, but they don't act on it. So like, everybody knows that it's better to just take your car to the mechanic, tell them that there's a weird noise, get it fixed now. But everyone almost always just waits later, and it's so much worse. And that's why this conceptualization of a dragon growing is so great, because a little dragon is manageable, but a giant dragon is almost completely unmanageable. And one of the things I wanted to include in my video that I didn't for time was the idea that that you have to confront the dragon, in that if you don't, eventually it leaves the cave and burns your whole village down. So like, the best case scenario is you go confront the dragon when it's small and defenseless in its own, where it resides. So that's the best scenario for you. The worst scenario is you ignore the dragon and you pretend like it's not there, and eventually it grows huge, leaves the cave, and destroys your entire village with fire, and you have no defenses. So like, that's something I wanted to include. I didn't have time to, but that's like the ultimate representation of one of your problems. It's like, acknowledge it, fight it where it lives, conquer it, get the gold, as Peterson would say. Win the reward that comes with risking, whatever it is you risked, and then ideally you get the princess or whatever, or the gold or whatever it is. And worst case scenario is you just ignore it and it grows, and it basically turns your life upside down.
Yes. Yeah. And the idea, things you imagine that things either get better or they get worse. But in reality, like you said, we all know things cannot get better. Like, entropy is a law of science.
Oh, it's so bad.
Things have to get worse because it's not going to stay the same. It's not going to get better. So it has to get worse. And so the fact that we can't reason ourselves into action based on that alone is kind of interesting. But one thing that I especially like about the dragon analogy is that it's not that problems grow, to gargantuan size on their own, but they actually have a life of their own.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that
Yeah, I like that.
that is especially so. This might be a Peterson thing, but it I'm conceptualizing like when I had a similar car dragon.
Oh yeah.
Like that, it really is the Keystone example. It was slightly different. It was my car started making a sound, and I investigated it, and it turns out that it was going to be a lot to fix. So I was better off just selling it because it was running, and if you have a running car, it's worth something. Um, but I kind of had I was just put it off. I did the classic, just ignore the fact that it's on my to do list. And then eventually it broke totally down and was just sitting in the street. And then so the life of its own started to form, where like all of a sudden it was like a project. It was like you were a project manager. It was like I had a project. I had to. It wasn't as simple as it seemed. I had to get
Right.
like a fresh title. But when I went to the DMV, the title still had the original lien on it from when I lived in New York. And when I called the car loan company, they said they released the lien, but they released the lien in New York, but not in Virginia. So I had to kind of go through the rigmarole of contacting everyone, talking to each other. And then when I finally got the clean title, then I had to go through the business of trying to find someone to buy it and move it when it was not worth anything. And it was like
All at
it
once.
was like a job. It was
Yeah,
had
yeah.
a life of its own, similar to my job has a life of its own. And so I was obviously deeply in regret that I didn't deal with the dragon at
Right,
its
and that's the
inception.
thing is all those things have to happen at once in a much more rushed, chaotic time frame than if you confronted them on your own accord and your own time. Where it's like, okay, you like, so the title thing, like all this, so you didn't have a vehicle when all this was happening, right? Because your
Well,
vehicle.
we had Amy's, so
Well, but you didn't have your own vehicle, so
right.
like if you had done it sooner and said like, okay, I'm gonna try to sell my car while I still have it and it still works, then all this stuff is a little less urgent and it's a little less like, you don't have to get the title right now to figure this out to get your new car or whatever. So it's funny because it just I can't like the conceptualization of something just growing and growing and growing and then just like exploding when there's no more room for it to grow. It's like a dragon bursting out of a cave. It's like, here I am. It's like, it's such a good conceptualization because it's just like, if you go in and you attack it on your own, then you fight it where it lives, and it's much safer than it bursting out of a cave and just like destroying you with fire. Like I love it, but
Yeah,
I also hate it
yeah.
because it's so true. It's like, it's just so true. Everything, like every little thing. One of my I included this, of course, it's not going to make any sense to anybody, but I included it in the video, was the dog that misbehaves. I think I've told you this before.
Yes, yeah.
When we knew we were having a baby, uh, we had a dog that misbehaved, completely, just, got up on the furniture. And I had just been saying, well, he'll grow out of it. He'll grow out of it. He'll grow out of it. I've been saying that for, as long as we've had him. And this had been like 2 years. And I'm like, he's still a puppy. He'll grow out of it. And so he wouldn't listen. He would go in the backyard and he would roll around in the mud. And it was just like, it was taking up so much time dealing with this dog. And then we thought, okay, when we have a baby, what the heck are we going to do? Because, he's going to be jumping over the baby and we won't be able to control him. So, and I literally just looked at him like a dragon every day. And that didn't like exactly motivate me to take care of it, but I knew in my head that he was a dragon. Like I looked at him and I was like, that is a dragon. That it's a dragon, and we're getting to the point where that dragon's going to burst out of its cave pretty soon. Like, I really need to do this. So 9 months before Felix was born, so basically, like, right around when we knew that we were going to have Felix, we had our friends come over and help us train the dog. And for 9 months, really, it was like a full year after Felix was born, but for 9 months, we trained the hell out of this dog and completely just slayed that dragon. And it, like, just... I don't know that we would have ever done it if I hadn't conceptualized it the way I did. Because I literally just saw him as a little dragon that was like growing and growing, and soon it was going to be a much bigger problem. Because training him when Felix was born would have been a nightmare and almost impossible. So I knew I had to train this dog before Felix got here. So I could almost see the dragon coming out of the cave, and that was when Felix was born. And so I was like, I have to attack this thing where it lives, otherwise it's going to be a nightmare. So like to me, that was like such a good, like, again, personal dragon where I could just see everything in that conceptualization. And then my other favorite, of course, is the national debt. That's just, growing.
Oh yeah,
growing and growing, and we just will not look at
it. Just added 10% to it yesterday.
Oh, it's gonna be bad, man. That's another one where we just. It seems like it's weird that I think who was it? Paul Ryan was like the only one who was really sounding the alarm on the national debt, and then he kind of just slowly slithered away.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
He voted for all the omnibus bills. So it's weird. He was like sounding the alarm on it, but then it's almost like he knew that there was no hope and just was like, "See ya, I'm out." Really weird. I don't know what that was all about, but we have to get our spending under control, and it just seems like it's just classic. Like no one wants to do it because it's unpopular and you will probably lose elections, and so it's like it's just just lie or just lie or don't mention it or look the other way. No one ever mentions it. Most people don't even think about it. And the ones that do usually forget about it. Like I don't think about it daily or anything.
It is definitely ignored on a bipartisan basis because you're right. It is totally unsexy. It does not help your reelection effort.
Well, to whatever politician sees this, so none. I will give my vote to the first person that campaigns primarily on balancing the budget and wiping out some of that debt. So there you go. You got one vote. But you're right. That'll 2 votes. All right, excellent. But you're right. That'll never happen because what's popular right now seems to be to offer people free stuff that would be, impossible to pay for, like literally impossible to pay for. So I think we're heading in the opposite direction. And again, it's growing, growing and growing.
Dragon.
Yeah, that is going to be
that's
an insane dragon when that bubble bursts, like an economic collapse. I assume. I can't imagine.
That's gonna be one where you're probably better off in the blast radius.
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking. I don't know. I don't know. I've tried to look into it, but I just assume what would happen is that, if we default on our national debt, then the economy basically collapses, and I just assume what will happen is hyperinflation to try to keep the economy going, and so. Historically, that is an awful idea. You end up. Have you ever looked into? I was looking into this not that long ago, but I don't know if I'll get the details right. But in Germany, when they had the hyperinflation, have you ever looked into that?
Is that video you sent me?
It's back. Probably. I probably did. I was so fascinated by it.
It was like an older guy reading from a book.
Yeah.
And there was kind of some graphics.
Yeah, I forgot about that. He was actually talking about he was talking about how the
how inflation really hurts the kind of the elders of the society who have spent their whole career building up their, savings, 401ks, and then all of a sudden they become relatively worthless.
Yeah, actually, and he was also making a point, or maybe this was a different video, that one way that you can reach crazy inflation is boomers who have a ton of money in their savings account or in cash under their mattress, which sounds crazy. It sounds like, how could there be enough boomers out there with cash under their mattress to where they reintroduce that into the economy? So what happens is, in his theory, which is, again, this seems a little unlikely, probably something much worse would happen and much less, conspiratorial would happen. But he says that boomers, because of the way they grew up, have cash under their mattress, like thousands and thousands of dollars of cash under their mattress. They don't trust banks, whatever. So they have it all in their mattress. And what happens is you have all these weird economic issues that happen where the Fed gets involved and they start, they try to pump more money into the economy, kind of like what's happening right now. They lower interest rates, but that doesn't do anything. And then they start returning. They just do like a Hail Mary, and the Fed starts giving people money based on their entire life's taxes. So like they give tax returns based on like their prior life's taxes. So they're just dumping money in the economy. And finally, the boomers, according to this theory, which again, this sounds so crazy, but he does a much better job explaining. Finally, the boomers feel safe enough and comfortable enough to spend that cash under their mattress. And so they start doing that, and all of a sudden you have this like crazy hyperinflation that happens, and it just basically destroys the economy, because obviously, you can't. The Fed's still printing money. You have all this other inflation.
The supply of money just goes through the roof.
Yeah, and so all the prices go, through the roof as well. So it was an interesting like theory. I'd never heard anything like it, and so that might have been what I sent you. I don't remember. I watched it once, but it was interesting to watch, like a different theory about how we could have an economic collapse. But in Germany, it was before World War II. They had hyperinflation where I can't remember what caused it. I'm so bad about details. I just remember like the meat of the thing. But what happened was they basically printed money. The mint in Germany printed francs, German francs, I think it was what it is, nonstop. And so what was happening was the price of everything was going up like crazy and crazy fast, like every day. So what happened was because the hyperinflation, that like everyone was a millionaire like overnight. And so what would happen was when you would work and you would get paid in suitcases worth of cash. And because it was they started having to weigh the suitcases of cash to count the money because there was no way to quickly count it. That's how fast the inflation was happening. And then it got so bad that people ended up leaving the cash and just taking the suitcases because the suitcases were worth more than the money. So it's crazy. I was like that's recent history. It's like 100 years ago or whatever. Or I guess it would be probably a little bit less than 100 years ago. I don't know exactly. It was in the early 1900s. But it's mind blowing. Like, can you imagine like going to work and getting paid with suitcases full of money and it being so worthless, like to buy food, that you just take the suitcase to try to trade that for food? It's amazing.
It's crazy.
Anyways, I don't know. That's kind of a tangent, but I just thought it was interesting. And I don't know. I just don't have the kind of faith that I think most people have. Like, if you ask the average person, like, do you feel like safe or comfortable? You think that we're going to be on this trajectory forever? My like baseline assumption is definitely not. Like, it's a miracle we've made it this far. Like, this can't last forever. I mean, I hope it does, but it's my assumption is that it won't. And most people, I think their assumption is that like the government will take care of it. Like, they don't really understand that resources are finite and that the government can't just take care of. They can't just wave a magic wand. They think you can. Like, most people are going to get their check in the mail next month and they won't ask where it came from or if we went in debt or, none of that matters to them. It's just like I've seen people on Twitter, like AOCs and these types of people that are like, don't let anyone ever tell you again that the government can't afford to send you a check or whatever, because they just did it. And I'm just like
they're just
they're kicking the can down the road. Exactly. Yeah. It's like, this is so bad. Ugh. So I don't have a lot of faith in any of that stuff. I think it's a dragon. I think it's growing.
Yeah, and, I think I probably should stop myself based on the next topic of conversation. not saying things that you don't, not talking about things you don't know enough about.
Yep.
Because I actually haven't. I've kind of decided that I don't have sound enough and well-researched enough opinions on like the national debt to really opine. But I think there are a few things that I can just, based on my experience in business, that I can apply. Like the first thing is that like the absolute value of the debt is not as important as its relative value to your gross national product.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, because like an absolute number is just a number. Like 23 trillion in debt, which is what it is right now. If our gross national product was 100 trillion, then it would be much different than it is right now. I think it's probably around 20 trillion or something around there. It's because just recently the national debt exceeded our gross national product for a year.
Right.
But even still, like from a business perspective, if you had a debt to income ratio of 5 to 4, which is like what it is right now, I guess, that's not necessarily bad, but it's like the trending, what direction is it moving?
And I remember when I researched it, it has to do with, there's a point of no return where the interest becomes...
Right, you have to be able to service the interest on your debt, or then it's the point of no return.
Yeah, basically, and I thought we had passed that, but maybe not. I thought we had passed the point of no return where it was like, unless we do something drastic, it's just going to keep going up, and there's basically nothing you can do about that. But again, you and I are probably both in the same boat where we don't know enough about it, but I still like talking about it because I find it interesting. But you're right.
Yeah.
Neither of us are experts in this, by any means.
Right. Yeah. And then the other thing, the relation, the relative value between the gross national product and the debt is like something that I look at. And then the other thing is when you are obtaining more debt, what are you spending that money on is crucially important. So, I mean, you're a businessman too, you would understand. Like taking out a loan to pay the payroll for your employees is a really bad sign. That means your
Yes.
company is not producing enough money to be able to just serve its
Right.
normal operations. You take out debt for infrastructure, to build buildings, and in the case of government, like roads and
Yeah.
like the financial infrastructure. So, like in my mind, if the government assumed debt for infrastructure reasons, that would be a great reason because you get a return on that investment.
Yes.
You're going to
That's a good
increase the
point.
gross national product.
But
And there are other things too,
if it's
like
to pay
education.
if it's to
There's a lot
pay
of
the bureaucracies that are spread out all over the U.S., then that's probably not a good sign.
Right, exactly. So the economic stimulus, again, it's like it's basically a short-term band-aid. That's not going to do anything to build up the long-term productive capability of the country. So that's, in my opinion, bad debt. Now, whether or not it's necessary
I was going to
for
say it might
other
be
reasons,
necessary debt.
yeah,
I mean, I assume it's probably necessary to to keep your business afloat. I mean, it's basically going to be doing the same thing that it is doing. Like people are going to get that check and theoretically, or that loan from the government, and theoretically that will be necessary to keep the business
right.
going.
Like that's right, exactly. It's bad, but it's necessary because you could, if you were running a business, you could see a scenario, where one of your production facilities blows up, and we do have to take a loan so we can just have cash flow to pay our employees while we reconstruct the building. So because if the company goes under, then the productive capability of it, just totally vanishes. So that would be bad,
but necessary.
Bad loans, but necessary.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I think that's probably what it is. Like I don't think anybody's too happy about having to spend what we just spent. What, $2 trillion, right? 2 trillion.
Yeah.
But I do think it's necessary personally.
Yeah.
There are some weird things. You'll be getting a check, I assume, and I'll be getting a check.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know about you, but I don't need a check.
Right. Yeah. That's the other thing too. I was thinking.
So it does seem like, I know they're trying to be quick about this, but the means testing doesn't make any sense. It's based on, I know they don't have all of 2019's tax return or tax. What are they called? Is it tax? It's not tax return. What's the word when you file your taxes? I guess it is a tax return. I don't know. Yeah. Whatever it's called when I can't think of what it's called, but I call it a tax return. But when you file your taxes, your record, whatever it is, that shows how much you made. Not all of 2019's are in, so they have to go to 2018's. But that really makes no sense because if you own a business, which is what primarily people are going to need, I would think, they're going to need that money for that primarily. You would want to know like what their most recent business was doing, not like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. So it's kind of weird. It just seems like I'm not sure what a good solution is, to be perfectly honest, but it does seem weird that I'm getting a check. I mean, and my employees should get a check. So it's weird that I'm getting one. The whole thing's a little weird. I know I'm not the normal situation, but
I thought the same thing.
So my coworker at Charter is getting one too, and we're still working. So I don't understand why we're getting one.
It should be. That's what I thought too. It should be diverted to businesses that are employing people and people who have been laid off. But like you said, it might be just a logistical problem of needing to get it out. So
yeah, it's really weird. And I know there's some complications with, you don't want to, so you wouldn't want to give only checks to unemployed people because that would incentivize letting your employees go on unemployment so you could save money.
Right.
So there's that complicated thing. But I don't know. Then it's also weird that you're employing they're getting a check and you're getting a check. It's weird. I know it's they have to get it done quickly and it's messy, but again, there's some inefficiencies, some deep inefficiencies going on here. We will pay for them. We will pay for them almost certainly.